भाषा एक धर्म अनेक भाषा सर्वभूति मनी सदीक्षा सर्वभूति मनी सदीक्षा एक रूप हो दुनिया सगळे गाँव में गुणगान एक रूप हो दुनिया सगळे गाँव में गुणगान किया वन मेहर बाबा मेहर बाबा मेहर बाबा किया वन मेहर बाबा मेहर बाबा मेहर बाबा No matter what languages we speak, it's English, Hindi, Hebrew, French or Greek. No matter what languages we speak, it's English, Hindi, Hebrew, French or Greek. Love all as you love yourself is the message that we preach. Love all as you love yourself is the message that we preach. We are all one. In Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Meher Baba, we are all one. In Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Meher Baba. एकच भाषा ठाऊक आम्हा विशुद्ध प्रेमाची एकच भाषा ठाऊक आम्हा विशुद्ध प्रेमाची ज्योत जागवू मनी आऊया मेहर प्रीतीची ज्योत जागवू मनी आऊया मेहर प्रीतीची दास प्रतापा नवसृष्टीचे करूया नवनिर्माण दास प्रतापा नवसृष्टीचे करूया नवनिर्माण मेहर बाबा 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 अवतार मेहर बाबा की जय।
Hi, everyone, and happy 62nd anniversary to everyone at Avatar's Abode. Sing a song of Meher Baba, sing of the joy his magic touch of love will bring. Sing it loud, sing it bright for the rest of your life. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of. He came to show that every heart could share the bounty of the treasures hidden there. He lit his candles in the dark that we might see. Above the noise he sang his song of silence that we might be free. So sing a song of Meher Baba, sing of the joy his magic touch of love will bring. Sing it loud, sing it bright for the rest of your life. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of. He personally sees to each detail, correcting every error without fail. There is no lesson of the world he does not teach. There is no corner of your heart he will not reach. So sing a song of Meher Baba, sing of the joy his magic touch of love will bring. Sing it loud, sing it bright, for the rest of your life. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of. And just to show the depth with which he cares, the bouquet of his close ones he now shares. Those who were there to satisfy his every whim now share their devotion as if flowers of their love for him. So sing a song of Meher Baba, sing of the joy his magic touch of love will bring. Sing it loud, sing it bright, for the rest of your life. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of. In the morning, the birds sing out his praise. In the night, the crickets chatter of his ways. Shall we not shout his name aloud while we have the chance? Shall we not share with all the world this divine romance? And sing a song of Meher Baba, sing of the joy his magic touch of love will bring. Sing it loud, sing it bright, for the rest of your life. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of. Never could you sing it long enough to give the praise that he is worthy of.
Jai Meher Baba, everyone. Mark and Lisa here again for you, and we're going to do a song called Listen Humanity, God Speaks. And it's based on lots of Baba book titles, which we've known and loved all these many years of reading Baba's wonderful books. So we took their titles and strung them together into this song.
Jai Baba, hope you enjoy it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks.
He's the everything and the nothing. The nothing and the everything. The narrow lane leads to the ocean of love. Avatar of the age, Meher Baba is manifesting.
Listen, humanity. God speaks. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. He gives the ocean where love alone prevails. The turning of the key only happens through effort and grace. Beams from Meher Baba create the glow and our gift of God. They give glimpses of the God-man. Because of love we are not we, but one. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. Just to love him is the real treasure for the wayfarers. To stay with God the beloved tells tales of the new life with the ancient one. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. Listen, humanity. God speaks. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Jai Baba. I am coming to you from Myrtle Beach, where some of us have gotten quite shaggy haired given our 2-month plus lockdown that's gone on here. But I am delighted to be able to participate in this anniversary celebration at Avatar's Abode virtually. My wife Carol and I were at Avatar's Abode last year for the spring Sahabas, had a wonderful time, met some great people, and we're actually hoping to come back again this year, though that doesn't look likely, maybe next year. But instead, I'm able to participate today by giving this talk, which is called A Gift from Master to Man, Meher Baba, and Obedience. And I've given this talk before, and when I've given it, I've asked the folks who were there, what is their instinctive reaction to the notion of obedience? Like, how many of them have some kind of negative or aversive response to the idea? And many of them raise their hands, maybe even most of them. And I used to feel that way myself. Because obedience seemed to me sort of like the castor oil of following Baba or a master, that you knew you had to do it, you knew it was probably good for you, but it wasn't necessarily the most fun part of following a master. And yet, as I have evolved my own thinking and awareness and experience over these years with obedience and trying to understand what it is, I've come to understand that, really speaking, it is, as Baba said, a gift from master to man. And it is even perhaps one of the greatest, if not the greatest gifts that Baba is giving me, and I think giving to all of us, is through obedience. And that's what I want to share with you today. And I want to say at the outset, Baba said we were all free to interpret him in our own way as long as we acknowledge that it was our interpretation. So what you're going to hear today is my interpretation, and some of you have really different points of view about that, which would be great, and would love to hear about those. But I want to thread together some ideas here during the course of this to try to lead us toward a coherent place by the end of it. And I want to start by talking about Baba's silence, because I think we all recognize that Baba's silence, which spanned 44 years of his physical advent, was one of the, if not the most salient physical feature of his life as the God-man, as the avatar. And he said some things about his silence. They weren't always easily and readily understood by us. And he said at various times he would break his silence, and then there was no apparent evidence of that having happened. But he did say that his silence would, when he broke it, would actually bring about a great transformation for all in creation. And because his silence was not for his benefit, he was already perfect. And so he didn't need the silence to advance himself. So he was doing it as part of his own universal work. And as I understand it, everything, or many things that Baba did, were of an archetypal nature. That is, what he does with one, or even is done on behalf of everybody. And it's almost like if he kept silence for 44 years, it is as if everyone got the benefit of external silence for 44 years. Now, what is the benefit of external silence? Baba said, external silence helps inner silence, and only in the internal silence is Baba found, in profound inner silence. I am never silent. I speak eternally. The voice that is heard deep within the soul is my voice. So Baba is saying clearly that external silence should really be an enabler of the inner silence of the mind to help us hear and respond to the dictates of the heart. And Baba did say that the results of his work universally would be to shift the dominant modality of humanity from the level of reason to the level of intuition. So his work was going to make available to humanity as a whole the capacity to attune to that inner voice. And the silence seems to me to have been the primary vehicle, or at least a primary vehicle, by which he was creating that capacity, creating that channel inside of people to be able to hear and respond to their intuition. And hearing that voice allows us to go inside and know, what is Baba speaking to for us? What is Baba telling us? So I was thinking about Baba's silence as I reflected on the meaning of obedience and how does that relate to obedience. And then the question was, okay, if the silence is to help create a channel inside of me to be able to listen to Baba, what is it that I'm listening for? And I thought about the prayer of repentance. Now, Baba gave the prayer of repentance in 1953, and it was said periodically during the course of the rest of his physical life. And in his final years, Baba participated in the saying of that in the Master's Prayer every single day in Mandali Hall. He would stand even when he was in great physical discomfort and pain, supported by Erich, so Erich could read these prayers. And Baba said his participation in the prayers was very important and significant, and that all who said the prayers thereafter would benefit by his participation. So taken together, the recitation of these prayers might be viewed by by many of us as an important means of establishing and maintaining connection with Baba on a daily basis. Now, going to the repentance prayer, the last line of the prayer was of particular interest to me because it says, "Forgive me for my constant failures to think and speak and act according to your will." Now, I found that very confusing over the years because Baba has also said that nothing happens except by his will. So how could there possibly be any failure to think, speak, and act according to his will? And he said that on a number of occasions in a number of different ways, that everything really is under his control. So one day I was in Mandalay Hall with Erich, and Erich, out of the blue, told this story. He talked about his own discomfort with the prayer of repentance and how it ended. And he spoke about how when the prayer was originally, because for the same reason, how does it make sense that we could fail to think, speak, and act according to Baba's will when everything happens by his will? But he said the prayer was actually given out by Baba in 1953 in Gujarati. And the word in Gujarati that was used at the end of that prayer was the word marji. And marji can mean either will or wish. So it turned out that when the prayer was printed in English and translated, and many copies were made, it ended up being translated as will. And this Erich brought to Baba's attention and said, "Baba, this isn't right." And Baba said, "Well, there are all these prayers printed up. Let's just let it be." And parenthetically, maybe that was Baba's avataric mistake to allow that to be a question. I don't know. But at any rate, because of this, Erich said that when he says the prayer, he would use the word wish. Forgive us for our constant failures to think, speak, and act according to your wish. So this made complete sense to me. It addressed the very thing that had confused me. And from then on, I started saying the prayer differently and would substitute the word wish for will at the end of it. So just as a postscript, a few years later, I was back in India and I was at morning arti. And everyone there was saying the prayers, and we got to the prayer of repentance, and we got to the last line of it. And I said to myself, there are all these people here. They're all saying, "Forgive me for constant failure to think, speak, and act according to your will." And I thought, Daniel, stop sticking out like a sore thumb. Get with the program. Just go with it. And so that day I actually said, for the first time since that day in Mandalay Hall with Erich some years before, I said, will instead of wish. Later that day, we all got on the bus and went to Marizad, and we're sitting in Mandalay Hall again with Erich. And wouldn't you know it, out of the blue, Erich tells the exact same story again. And that sealed it for me. That felt like that was Baba's confirmation, that this really is, at least for me, what he intends for the prayer to mean. So I started to understand then that this business about fulfilling Baba's wish was primary, and I began to make the connection to obedience, to start saying, something, if I'm obeying Baba's wish, that is really tantamount to obeying Baba, because Baba's wish was what we do to please him, what we do that we feel he wants us to do. That sounds to me like at least a form of obedience. So that got me thinking about what is obedience? And I want to talk a little bit about what I believe are two different facets of obedience. And Baba speaks about these two facets in somewhat different ways, and it's certainly a deeper way. But to be simple about it, he talks about these in the discourses. I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler. So Baba often communicated about what he wanted from his lovers. He gave orders to people. He gave them to his mandali, of course. He gave them to his close ones. He called together groups of people and gave them orders. Sometimes he gave orders writ large to everybody to observe silence or keep a fast or say certain prayers or things like this a certain number of times a day. So there were these orders that Baba gave, but then there's this whole field of ways of attuning to Baba that one might call attuning to his wish. And I would put these two kinds of obedience into two categories. One is exoteric and one is esoteric obedience. Now, exoteric is literally something that is literal, that it comes from an external origin. So if Baba says, go to this place and do this thing and be back by such and such a time, that's an exoteric order in that sense. Baba's been very clear and specific about it. Then there's a whole stream of things that we would call esoteric, which means that they have an inner meaning or origin to them. And and Baba, it seemed that this is guidance that Baba wanted us to learn and how to listen for and follow. Baba did say, if you obey implicitly and unquestioningly, you win. He actually seemed, in a way, to place as great or sometimes maybe even greater emphasis on the implicit guidance than he did on the explicit, even though he was absolutely strict about his orders. But he placed great emphasis on people learning to follow this inner guidance. And I want to give just a couple of examples of people that we know of and that some of you knew. One is William Donkin, how during the New Life, Donkin was one of the companions that was with Baba. And he went through the Lengodi phase and the Gypsy phase with Baba. And in 1952, all the companions were with Baba in Dehradun. And Baba changed the terms of the New Life. And he said, so from now on, you can choose either what I'm going to call Plan A or Plan B. And Plan A, you stay with me and continue to follow the New Life with me. And Plan B is you go on your own. You can be in business or what have you, but you're still following the New Life, but not with me physically. And Don chose Plan B, to be on his own. And he later sent a letter to Elizabeth Patterson clarifying that he did this because he felt that that's what Baba wanted from him, even though Baba never gave him that order. Another example, which is close to home here, is Francis Brabazon. And this is a story I heard from Bill LePage, so hopefully I got it accurately, especially if Bill is watching, he told the story about how Francis was with Baba in India along with Ivy Deuce in 1952. And at the time, Francis, I believe, was the obvious successor to the Baron in leading the Sufi movement in Australia. And Baba said something to the two of them like, Ivy can become Murshida for America and Francis Murshid for Australia. And Francis declined. And he did this because even though outwardly Baba had made this pronouncement, Francis actually felt that Baba wanted something different from him. And so he demurred on that. And later on, Erich did in fact confirm Francis in his interpretation that he had interpreted Baba properly. So these are just two examples of really great disciples who we know of, who Baba had trained to listen to the inner prompting and the inner guidance as their form of obedience of him. And there are many other stories that I think many of us know of. And it's actually been observed that in the later years, as time went on, Baba gave fewer and fewer orders to people and really looked to people to rely more on that internal guidance. I know that Elizabeth Patterson and Narina Machabelli, when they established the center in Myrtle Beach during the 40s and early 50s, there were many, many things that they had to decide. And some of them, of course, they corresponded with Baba about. But many of them were decided through their own inner interconnection with Baba and their own sense of, okay, this is what Baba's guiding to be done in this situation or the other. And it was observed that in the later years, Baba gave fewer and fewer directives. I know I was with the Mayor Baba Washington Gathering for many years, and at one time, Erich wrote us a letter. It's been published since in the book, The Ancient One by Nashawan. And in it, one of the things Erich addressed was this whole business about orders and so on. And he said it wasn't like Baba was kind of constantly giving us a stream of orders. That wasn't how things were around him. And so it really was, over time especially, Baba encouraging people to look inwardly for that guidance and start to rely more and more on their own intuition. So in the next part of the talk, I want to talk about what is the challenge that we're then faced with, and how do we go about facing that challenge if we're going to find our source of guidance and be able to obey it more within. And we'll cover that. So welcome back. This is part 2 of the talk, Gift from Master to Man, Mayor Baba and Obedience. And in the first part, I spoke about the importance of Baba's silence in opening channels within us to be able to hear and respond to his voice, and spoke about that when we listen to that voice, what is it we're listening for? And we said that we're primarily listening for Baba's wish. What is it that he is asking of us? And that the whole notion of obedience is either the outer, the exoteric obedience, or it's the internal obedience, or the esoteric obedience, and that Baba over time seemed to place a great deal of emphasis, of course, always on following the external obedience, but especially over time, more emphasis and more emphasis on the implicit obedience and learning how to read Baba within. And so I want to pick up there and talk about what I believe is a core challenge, given all that, which is how do we strengthen that internal channel for knowing what his wish is so we can then follow it and obey it. And, a channel that Baba has dug within each of us, and he's dug it within each one of us. And he's actually dug it for everyone, and people will start coming to that channel as they are ready for it. But those of us who have the great fortune of knowing Baba have maybe the great opportunity to know that channel, and then to really make use of that channel. Because like any kind of channel that's dug in a harbor or in a waterway, that it gets dredged and the channel's created, but you have to use it, and you have to keep it active, or else the silt just piles up and the channel gets clogged again. So I want to focus on how to go about making use of that channel so that we can obey Baba and obey what his wish is. And, Elizabeth Patterson from Myrtle Beach, the founder of the Meher Center in Myrtle Beach, is well known for every day she would sit on the edge of her bed in the morning for a few minutes, and she would ask Baba inwardly, "What are you asking of me today?" And then she would say, the day then became the answer. And that was her practice of learning to tune in every single day to Baba's guidance within, so that she can then follow it. Now, I've found that I had to develop my own practice as it relates to this. And I remember one of the first times that it got clear to me what this practice was of turning to Baba that way. I was in India with my wife at the time, and we were experiencing some issues with fertility. We were trying to conceive a child and not being successful. And so we went to visit Bao, who at that time had an office in Lower Mehrabad, in addition to at the trust office. And we sat with him in his office, and we shared with him all that we'd been going through and all of our struggles and so on, and trying to say, what should we do? Should we do medical procedures? Should we do adoption? Should we give up completely and just be childless? What should we do? And Bao listened very patiently, and then he said, why don't you go to the Samadhi and ask Baba? Now, that might seem like an obvious thing to do, and it wasn't like I'd never asked Baba for anything before, but this was a very, this really mattered. This was like a big thing to put in front of Baba that way. And so we left Bao, and I went up to the Samadhi and sat with Baba, and I said, Baba, what are you asking of us relative to this situation? And I felt Baba say, I felt within, you should adopt. And okay, I got that. Did I really hear it? And so then I went down the hill. We were staying at the Mayor Pilgrim Center at the time. And I went down to the MPC, and there's a little reading room right next to the dining room there. And there would be newspapers in there. And so I just decided to go in there and sit and just relax for a while. And I picked up a newspaper. And I opened the newspaper. And wouldn't you know it, I just opened it at random. And there was, like, on both sides of the newspaper was a big article, The Joy of Adoption. So I took that as Baba's confirmation. But yes, you actually did hear me. and that was, and there were other things that Baba did around that same thing. But it all confirmed for me that, yes, I was actually hearing Baba, even though it wasn't like a big voice thundering from on a high or anything like that. But it was true, and that I should follow it. And that, of course, is what we did. Now, I started from that time on to start to say, well, maybe I should really be doing this with a lot of things in my life. It's not just relegated to kind of, quote, big things. It should be everything. Because Baba did say or indicate that in the spiritual life, there's no real difference between big things and little things, and that we should not create some kind of false hierarchy of differences between them. So I realized I need to be doing this as a practice. And so, because every time I'm faced with something like that, it is an opportunity for me to align myself with Baba's wish and to find out, well, what is Baba wanting from me? And so I found myself making this kind of effort by placing before Baba a core question, which is, what is it you're asking of me relative to the situation or issue or decision I'm facing? And then listening for a response. Now, having done this for a while, I began to feel that there was an essential precondition to be able to actually receive a response. And that precondition was that I would say to Baba, when asking the question, say, whatever you give me by way of a response that I can actually discern, I will follow it. In other words, I was committing myself to whatever guidance he gave me. In other words, I was not treating it like a second opinion. I was treating it as an order from my master. And so I would have to accept what he gave me, whether it was in keeping with my personal preferences or my liking. I was still committed to following that voice. And that's what I would call kind of a both feet inside the circle kind of attitude. Now, there's a quote I want to read that I read about that time, and it's really relates to this very thing. I think it's a beautiful quote. And it's by a man, it's not from Baba, it's from a man named W.H. Murray, who wrote a book called Everest, the West Ridge, which is a National Geographic book. And in it, he says, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one commits oneself, then providence moves too. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. I learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do, or dream you can, begin it. boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So, having formulated a question to Baba of what are you asking of me relative to this issue, situation, or decision, and then saying to Baba, whatever guidance you give me, I am committed to following, then and only then am I ready to listen, to hear his voice. Now, the question is, what's the language in which Baba speaks? Now, for many years, I would go to Baba and asking these kind of questions, and I would sort of want to hear a clear verbal response. And it was a rarity, if ever, that I got that kind of response. In fact, if I heard a verbal response, I would also sometimes wonder, am I just making that up? Is that just because it might be in keeping with my desires? Or maybe it's what I'm assuming Baba would say without actually hearing what Baba said. So, and what I've found over time is that the way Baba speaks is less in the language of words, which are often from the mind, and listening from a different place inside me, which is deeper in my heart. So the question then is, what does it mean to listen from the heart? Now, a number of years ago, I came across, I was exposed to some Sufi teachings that come out of a lineage of Sufism that came through Morocco, called the Shadaliya lineage. And in this lineage, they talk about the heart, and they say there are 4 different layers of the heart. The first layer is the layer of the mind, what we would call the mind. That is, and sometimes some Sufis might refer to this as the nafs or nafs, depending on how you pronounce it, though that's not really technically accurate. But this layer is kind of where the chatter of the mind exists, and it's a lot of what our conscious, or at least my conscious, experience is listening to kind of all the thoughts I have about things. They might think, I really like this person. I don't like this. I think this person's a jerk. I think this person's a great person, whatever. And this consumes much of the conscious mind. And it's basically driven by either trying to optimize pleasure or mitigate against or eliminate pain. Now, that first layer is actually driven by the second layer, which is the layer I would call emotions. And these are typically anger, fear, sadness, maybe pleasure, but they're emotions that come and go. They're like waves that ride on top of the ocean, and they're not reliable as a guide for anything. They just are simply reactions to things in keeping one's own samskaric predilections. And so, and Baba even once termed these 2 layers of the mind, the first and second layer, as feverish imagination working under the stimulus of desires. Feverish imagination, the first layer, stimulus of desires, the second layer. So when I would say, when I would make a decision, I said, well, I'm going with my gut on that one. I think very often it was from the second layer. I think that's what I thought of as my second layer. And which is not a reliable source of guidance for anything. It's just desires. It's actually in the third layer of the heart that we actually start tuning in to Baba, to the divine. And actually, the word for heart in Arabic actually literally means that which turns. So in the third layer, the heart has actually turned away from the desires and the sanskaras to listen to a reliable source of guidance, which is from the divine, from Baba. And we sense the voice as the voice of intuition. And Baba did say, I am never silent, I am always speaking. The voice of intuition is my voice, heard deep within. So when we sense it and we follow it, and the third layer, we're actually following the guidance of God. And Baba also said, intuition is always right. In the fourth layer, which I don't feel that I can be as authoritative about, because it's not one that I know that I'm suffused with, but this is one where one goes even deeper past intuition into the realm of inspiration, illumination, and finally realization. And in this layer, there's no turning back. The heart is completely focused on the divine. Now, this is an interesting formulation of these 4 layers, and it actually maps almost precisely against what Baba has said. He said, when you feel something is intuitive and you have no doubt about it, then know it is real. Passing doubtful thoughts and temporary emotional feelings should not be given importance. That's first and second layer. But when you feel it touches your heart, that's third layer, follow it. When it is from the mind, it is not intuition. Intuition means that which comes from the heart. In the divine path, first there's intuition, then inspiration, then illumination, and then finally realizations. If it touches your heart, follow it. And God willing, from today, you will know that if it is intuition, it is right. Now, I have found the 4 layers of the heart to be a useful paradigm for helping me navigate my own inner experience of tuning into Baba, to really help me stay on track, to make sure that when I turn to Baba to listen to his voice, so I can feel like I know what his wish is, I can then make sure I've descended to the proper layer of the heart, so I can feel more confident that what I'm hearing from Baba is in fact intuition. But to get to this third layer clearly requires the silencing of the mind. It requires the silencing of the chatter, and it requires the silencing of the desire patterns that drive the chatter. And this silencing is this channel that Baba creates into the third layer, I believe, is the very channel that Baba came through his silence to open up for each one of us. I've also found that when I listen from the heart, there are actually different ways that I can listen. But one of the things I've learned over time is that if I can make my heart as pliable and malleable as possible when I'm listening from that third layer. So I'm not listening for words, but I'm listening through feeling. And I can feel my heart in that third layer. And I can feel what shape it has and what qualities it has. And as I ask my question for guidance and I feel the shift, any shift in the quality or the nature of the feelings in that heart, that becomes like a primary way for me to know. So here's what the guidance is. So for example, if I'm going to be meeting with somebody and I say to Baba, what are you asking of me in relationship with this person? Maybe I go into the third layer and I can feel it's very warm and embracing in the quality of my heart. And I can say, oh, it's asking me to be warm and embracing. Or alternatively, maybe I go in my heart, I've asked how to relate to this person, and I can feel a kind of a holding back feeling, almost like a barrier in me. And that's maybe telling me that maybe I'm being asked to be a little bit more detached, like that. So these are ways I've been experimenting with and trying to learn how to be more attuned to inside myself as a way of having a more refined, nuanced way of listening to Baba's promptings in my own heart. So Baba said, the book I shall make people read is the book of the heart, which alone holds the key to the mystery of life. And this is what I feel Baba is talking about when he says that the only book he would have us learn to read is this book of the heart. This is in this third layer. This is the book of the heart that I feel Baba's trying to open up in us. And it seems that it's the channel he dug through his silence that allows us to go into that deeper layer of the heart. Now, I want to shift the focus a little bit, though it's not really a shift, but I want to talk about a shift from talking about obedience to talking about reliance. So learning to trust and rely on intuition and then obeying it, which is what we've been talking about in this part of the talk. It seems to me a lifelong process of learning and deepening that practice. It takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of practice. And in reality, this approach to obedience begins to translate to what I would call reliance. Now, the Sufis actually have a word for reliance. It's tawakkul. And it literally means reliance on the one. And in the Sufi path, the notion of developing this reliance is seen as one of the most important qualities one can develop as an aspirant. And of course, Baba encouraged this reliance on him. He wanted us to make him his father, make him our father and our mother. And, I was always impressed with Bao Natu because I think he's a really great example of this. He wrote a series of books called Conversations with the Awakener, which are really about his process of bringing Baba into every decision in his life, in every facet of his life, and having that continual ongoing conversation with Baba, where he brings the challenges he faces, and not just the big ones, but the little ones too, to Baba, and asks Baba to help out with them and for the guidance on them. And I think he's a great example of that. So this development of reliance starts to become really primary when we talk about obedience, but reliance invariably requires risk taking. I know I was very associated with Kitty Davy at the Mayor Center for many years, and I always felt her encouragement to develop my reliance on Baba. But it was clear to me that the cost of that reliance was going to be having to develop trust in Baba, and to develop trust meant taking risks. Now, there's a quote that I've heard attributed to both Gurdjieff and Winston Churchill, both good guys, and it's a wonderful quote. It says, "Play with more than you can afford to lose, and then you will learn to play the game." So that seems very apt to me. I mean, I made a decision about adoption. That's more than you can afford to lose in a way. I left a very secure, excellent job that I was in 16 years, had a great job, paid well, and very secure. And I felt from Baba, no, it's time for you to leave and start a full-time consulting practice. And at the time, I had a very young child. I had all the financial responsibility. I had no guarantee of any clients or income. And I felt it. And it was a huge jump to do it. But I felt from Baba, now's the time to do it. And I did it. And it turned out to be the most wonderful thing I could have done. But it took a huge amount of trust to do that. There's another quote I heard from Adi that I think was attributed to Adi Keirani, where Baba said, "In matters of health, take no risks. In matters of wealth, take some risks. And in matters of God, take every risk." So I found that coming to a place of reliance on Baba through obedience means turning all of my life's choices over to them, not just the little ones, but also the big ones, and trusting in the inner guidance that I get, and also to accept it's a learning process. And even if I don't properly discern what the guidance is, if I'm doing it out of a place of sincerity, then there will be a kind of protection that Baba gives me even in that kind of situation. Now, Henry Kishauti once said that when it comes to God and our relationship to God, we're like the person who has inherited $1 million, but we sit on the sidewalk in front of the bank with a beggar bowl begging for pennies, even though we've got $1 million sitting in the bank. But we feel like and act like we're penniless. And Henry was pointing out that we have this wealth that Bob has given to us, and I'm going to put it in the terms I've been speaking here, this wealth of this interconnection with Baba that can be such a beautiful and reliable source of guidance to us, but instead we don't take advantage of it, and we don't realize it's there waiting for us. And that Baba's given this to us by opening the channel of our hearts and making that source of guidance available to us so we can obey him and really align our lives with him. And I do believe that this is one of Baba's, if not Baba's greatest gift that he's given us, to allow us to draw upon that infinite bank account that he's put there in our name so we can draw on it and gain access to the guidance that he's given us so we can come closer and closer to him in love and in obedience and in surrender. And the more we do it, the greater is going to be our capacity to do so. Now, I want to say one other thing here before I'm done, which is I want to talk. So far, I've talked here about the gift from master to man, but I want to talk a little bit about the gift from master to humanity. Because what about humanity as a whole? I mean, we know that Baba said his advent would be the end of a cycle of cycles, and that his manifestation would be the greatest, and that all in creation would feel and receive of it when he broke his silence, and that something would happen that has never happened before. Now, a few years ago, I heard a wonderful talk by Charles Haynes in which he shared his view about what that wonderful thing, because I could never figure out what is this thing that's going to happen. But he shared his view that when Baba breaks his silence, everyone will have opened that channel, and they will be consulting that channel and using that channel as a guide for their lives. And that therefore, as people use that channel and everyone starts to be aligned with God, that is a huge transformation. A transformation, as Charles said, civilization has never seen that kind of transformation before. And this is, I believe, and Baba's been talking about, and it would be the foundation for the new humanity, which Baba's been talking about since the 1930s. So this means that entire civilization will be founded on the joy of feeling the voice of divine intuition and inspiration, and aligning themselves with it. So, and they'll know that voice, and how they know it as Meher Baba, they will know it, and that will be the transformation that will be the result of Baba's speaking his word and breaking his silence. So Baba said that God gives us this precious, precious gift of his love. That's why we're all here, I think. He also said that he, as the master, has given us this gift of obedience. The gift is that he's given us this channel that we can go into to consult, to find him in our intuition as a way of helping to align our lives with him and become freer and freer in his love. And finally, our gift back to him is our surrender. And our surrender is our complete acceptance that in everything we do and everything that happens to us, that we understand that it is nothing but the outcome of his love for us. And it comes out of his own caring for each one of us. And it's in keeping with the quote from Hafez that Baba had read out just before he dropped his physical body in 1969, where Hafez says that whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Jai Baba, thank you for listening.